something completely different. I'm hit the
Yep.
Now we're recording.
Okay. Yeah, so Sunwork is a 501c3 nonprofit organization with California contractors licenses in both solar and plumbing. The organization was founded in 2005 with a mission of involving volunteers in the deployment of emissions-reducing technologies in order to help accelerate the spread of those technologies. And we use a fee-for-service model where our operation is funded through charges for the projects that we install, as opposed to being reliant on fundraising for donations or grants. Let's see. Our work started with residential solar projects in 2009, with a focus on homes where the electricity bill was too low to be a good fit for a conventional solar installer. Those projects use one of our staff installers, working with 2 to 4 trained volunteers, and typically take place over 2 days, most often on weekends. And through that program, we've now installed solar on more than 1,200 homes in the San Francisco Bay Area and also California's Central Coast region, totaling more than 5 megawatts of generating capacity. In 2013, we expanded our solar installation program to include systems for other nonprofit organizations. So those would be buildings like preschools, homeless shelters, cultural centers, or places of worship. And to date, we've completed 46 of those projects, which altogether provide a collective electricity bill savings of more than $10 million to those organizations over the system lifetime. The volunteers for these solar projects initially would start with an in-person training class, introducing them to the technology and also the pertinent safety principles relevant to the installation work. But in 2020, we pivoted to an online format for these classes, as so many organizations did. But most of the training for all our volunteers is hands-on, taking place at the actual job sites where the construction is taking place. And in total, more than 2,500 people have completed the classroom training from Sunwork, and more than 1,250 of those people have volunteered on at least one of our solar projects. And then more recently, in the summer of 2021, Sunwork expanded our product offerings to include heat pump water heaters. So a little bit of motivation for this. Thanks to sort of state level policy and also the work from the community choice energy providers in the state, the electricity supply in California has gotten cleaner and cleaner. And this works to sort of soften the decarbonization impact that rooftop solar projects have somewhat, but it also sharpens the impact of electrification projects where appliances or equipment that used fossil fuels for power get switched over to electric versions. And so that's sort of become one of the big new frontiers of combating climate change in the state. And it's something that we were excited to try to contribute to. So for our heat pump water heater projects, those just last a single day, and they use one of our staffs, typically supported by 2 volunteers. And to date in the Bay Area, we've installed 65 heat pump water heaters in the various Bay Area counties. So far, the volunteers helping out with heat pump water heaters have all been recruited from our solar volunteer pool, and they've mostly been folks who are either just interested in helping out with the decarbonization mission, or people interested in learning how to install heat pump water heaters at their own homes in DIY projects. But as we grow the program, we're looking forward to developing a dedicated heat pump water heater training class, and also hopefully being able to recruit current working plumbers who may be interested in branching into heat pump water heaters for their own businesses to come help out. So the task of converting California's water heating from gas to electric is going to be a big one, but there's also a big existing workforce that we'll hopefully be able to leverage to help with that work. So residential water heaters typically have a life of 10 to 12 years. So roughly 10% of home water heaters are already being replaced each year, supported by the workforce that we have. Some training of new heat pump water heater installers is definitely going to be needed, but so will augmenting the skills of a lot of existing water heater installers who are already doing this work. Replacing gas water heaters with heat pump water heaters shares a lot of similarities with gas for gas replacement work, but there are also some important differences, and I'll mention a few of the main ones here. So one relevant difference for heat pump water heater installations is larger dimensions. So tank upsizing is usually recommended for heat pump water heater projects to compensate for the longer heating times that these units have relative to gas-fired equipment. And many heat pump water heater models are unitized, with built-in heat pump components occupying sort of the section on top of the actual tank of the unit and adding height. Versus gas water heater projects, heat pump water heater projects also typically involve more piping work. The hot and cold water connections for most heat pump water heaters models are on the side of the unit to keep it out of the way of the heat pump equipment, as opposed to on the top, which is most common for gas water heaters. Meaning there's typically a need to extend the existing pipes somewhat for these projects. And on top of that, a new line is generally needed to deal with the condensate that heat pump water heaters produce in their operation. And then for non-unitized heat pump water heater models, where the tank and the heat pump equipment are separate, there's extra work running the piping from the tank location to the heat pump, which is typically outdoors. And for heat pump water heater projects, there's also a step of capping the gas line and testing to make sure that it's sealed properly, which would not be part of a regular gas-to-gas replacement. So these differences here are all aspects of heat pump water heater installation that a typical working heat pump or a regular gas water heater installer will already have the skills to deal with. They'll just add some hours to the projects. But this next set of differences involve tasks that currently working water heater installers may often not have much familiarity with. So one of those would be the inclusion of thermostatic mixing valves. These aren't an absolute must for heat pump water heater projects, but they are strongly favored by current policy because they allow the tank to be heated extra hot during hours where cheap, clean solar electricity is plentiful on the grid to reduce the need for heating when energy is scarcer on the grid. The inclusion of a thermostatic mixing valve allows this to be done without compromising safety because it regulates the temperature of the water coming out of the tank down to a safe hot water pipe temperature as it's sort of entering the house pipe system. Another heat pump water heater specific task could be including ducting. Heat pump water heaters need access to a large air volume to be able to extract enough heat from the air to meet the heating demand. This doesn't require any special action if the water heater is located in a garage or a large basement where there's a lot of air around. But for water heaters located in closets, for example, ducting to the exterior will often be needed. And then for most heat pump water heater projects, a new electrical circuit will need to be installed. In certain cases where there's an existing outlet in the immediate vicinity of the water heater, some of the newly available 120 volt heat pump water heater options can avoid this. But for most projects, it'll be necessary to install a new circuit. And this is work that the California State Contractors License Board has ruled may be done by the plumber. So this isn't work that would necessarily have to be subbed out to an electrician. It can be done in-house by a water heater installer, as long as that's something that they're comfortable with. But these tasks here may be unfamiliar to a lot of current water heater installers and may make them a little bit more nervous about taking these projects on. In light of this, I think there are sort of three main roles that Sunwork can play with heat pump water heaters. One is just deploying additional heat pump water heaters through direct installation, which we're doing now. Another could be to help influence the market price point for these projects downward, since contractors that offer heat pump water heaters right now are often pricing them with sort of an unnecessarily steep kind of luxury premium of many thousands of dollars. There may be some amount of sort of opportunistic pricing involved here, but I think there's probably also just a lot of kind of an interest in building in cushion, budget cushion for these projects, sort of stemming from the uncertainty they have around how the projects will go due to less familiarity with the technology. But in either case, I think we want to try to get the industry towards sort of more competitive pricing for these projects than we're seeing right now. And Sunwork may be able to help provide sort of a signal about where that pricing could be. But then finally, I think there's an opportunity for Sunwork to provide a space for working water heater installers who are not yet familiar with heat pump water heaters to get some additional hands-on practice with the technology and to get a little bit more comfortable with it before trying to install it on their own. Yeah, so that's sort of where Sunwork is looking with heat pump water heaters. And if anybody is interested in continuing that conversation, my contact info is there on the screen.